Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. I want to remind you that if you like the content that you see here, to visit our social media, especially YouTube, and and actually let people know, let us know that you like what you're seeing, and also leave a comment. We appreciate that. We appreciate hearing from you and responding to your questions and concerns. So today we're talking about mothers. Who are they? Well, they birth us, they nurture us, they guide us, and sometimes they have to protect us from evil. And today's guest is one such mother, and she's here to tell us about some important work that she has been doing in defense of children, and especially in protection of childhood innocence. And her name is Elena Barbera. Welcome to the program, Elena. It's great to meet you.
Same. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about American Groomer. That's not you. It's this film that you've been involved with. The kids are not all right, and they really aren't. I've as I mentioned to you before we started, I watched this documentary, and it's just really gripping. It's hard to put into words how shocking it is, how frightening it is, but really what a call to action it is. So we're going to talk about that. But before we go there and introduce you properly, as we always do, we're going to go to our framing aphorisms. The first one is from G.K. Chesterton, who wrote, "Fairy tales do not tell children that dragons exist. Children already know that dragons exist. Fairy tales tell children the dragons can be killed." Next, from Mel Gibson, uh, who once was quoted as saying that Hollywood is an institutionalized pedophile ring. It is a den of parasites who feast on the blood of children. Every studio in Hollywood is bought and paid for with the blood of innocent children. Would that that were only true of Hollywood. Unfortunately, as we're going to find out, this is true of society generally. Next, from no less than Adolf Hitler, who gets mentioned almost every day, everywhere on social media. But he actually said this. He said, "If the older generation cannot get accustomed to us, we shall take their children away from them and rear them as needful to the fatherland." And finally, from Pythagoras, the great mathematician and philosopher of ancient Greece, who said, "Educate the children and it won't be necessary to punish the men." Who do we have in the show today? Well, Elena Barbera, she's also known as the based mother. She describes herself as an average American mother. I would say she's very not average, very extraordinary, which is why we're talking to her. But she's turned unlikely YouTuber on her son's channel, which is at Sunny Faz. That's Faz. Tired of watching her country burn from the sidelines, she decided to pick a battle and fight it with her new documentary called American Groomer. It tells a story of how American children are being sexualized in their schools, how it came to pass that in 39 states, it's legal to show porn to school children, and what can be done about all of this. So the film is produced by, written by, and stars our guest, and it features interviews with the leaders of Gays Against Groomers, the American Principles Project, and the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. You could watch it free, as I did, on AmericanGroomerFilm.com. So, Elena, I guess where we start is I'd like to know a little bit more about your origin story and your family. We know that you got involved as a mother, but tell us a little bit about your family and your background and how you became sort of an unlikely filmmaker.
Well, it was during the summer of 2022. It was just myself and my son at home, and he was 17 at the time. And he said to me, "Mom, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. Will you sit down with me and do a mom reacts video?" And I said, "What's a mom reacts video?" I had no idea. And he said, "Oh, it's where I show you, stuff that's going on the internet, and you just say what you're thinking." I said, "All right, there's things you'll do to support your kid." I had zero interest in being an online personality or of any sort. And we did this video and it just took off. And so we ended up doing hundreds of videos together, growing this channel up to about, almost 600,000 subscribers very quickly. It was nuts. And what happened is, when a year or so went by, a little over a year, and he decided, he's 18 now, turning 19 soon, that he didn't want to be the kid who just did stuff online with his mother. And I was like, all right, I guess we're not doing this anymore. And but I realize now that that whole thing was just to prepare me for what it was that I was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And while all that was happening, I, of course, was paying closer attention to politics, developing a very strong mistrust of the mainstream media because I would see, let's just say, a politician give a full speech and see it, hear it all with my own eyes, see with my eyes and hear it with my ears, and then watch the mainstream media report on it in a completely different light,
Yeah.
take things completely out of context. So when I saw in the summer of 23, I was seeing a lot of news stories about these crazy parents who were banning books. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, listen, I am all about freedom and the freedom of speech, and I don't like censorship. But I don't trust these people. So let me buy these books they're talking about and see what's really going on here. And what I found inside these books were it was absolute filth.
Yeah.
Everything from kink, masturbation instructions, talking about porn, how to take naked selfies of yourself, the most disturbing stuff that's in at the time, I only found it in middle and high schools. Middle school starts at age 11.
Right.
And since and I prayed about it. That's who I am. I'm a, faithful person now, wasn't always. And it came to me to make this film. And so that
Wow.
YouTube experience prepared me for it. And our YouTube editor actually was the only person who worked on the film with me. And we put it together in just a couple of months, went up and down the East Coast, interviewing people, doing research, and what I've learned during the filmmaking blew my mind, and what I've learned since then is that the problem is even worse than I thought it
Yeah.
was when I made the film.
Well, I want to get into some more detail about the film and how it came about, but I have to say, the situation with your son is really remarkable because, as you know, the normal thing, I shouldn't say normal, unfortunately, the all too common thing that we see with parents and their children on YouTube is, in fact, it's the parent exploiting their child to get likes. And oftentimes, this is a scary part. I know this is covered in the film. Oftentimes, it's the parents who are actually the groomers of their own children, and they do this to exploit them for money, for sexual gratification, for different reasons, for your political advantages, and things of that nature. So, how extraordinary is it that God used YouTube in order to have your son bring you introduce you to to this medium, which of course turned out to be really a blessing because it introduced you to all of this and it led you to the making of this film. That's kind of remarkable how the roles were reversed there, isn't it?
It really is, and at the time, I had before COVID, I had been working in the live event industry, so, I was left we were the first ones to shut down.
Yeah.
I was in a place where it was like, "Where's the next you know, w loaf of bread coming from?" And then this YouTube thing came on and took off, and I thought that God had provided that in order to provide financially, and what it really was to prepare me for this journey of, trying to protect children. So
Hmm.
you never really know what's going on.
Yeah. But your background, I would think, as somebody who was involved in live events, you certainly have a background in content creation and in in presentation of media and entertainment events. And so in a funny sort of way, you were prepared to become a filmmaker, weren't you?
Yes, I mean, I'd been a writer since I was a little girl, and, part of my career, other than live events, was copywriting in marketing. So,
Hmm.
I had to do research on different topics for different clients, and I had to learn how to present information concisely, and that definitely did prepare me for this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, first of all, let's talk about the film. I have to ask you about the title. So how did the title come? Was this your idea or American Groomer, The Kids Are Not All Right? What's the story behind the title?
So, the title just hit me, like, popped into my head like a ton of bricks, and I said, "Well, you can't stick with the first title," and so I wrote, pages of other titles, and I scrapped them all and just went back to American Groomer. I just felt like it was hard hitting,
Yeah.
and The Kids Are Not All Right is kind of a play on the old song,
The song, right.
yeah, because the kids really aren't all right, and
No.
yeah, our schools are destroying their minds, and we see it. I mean, it's
Mhm.
becoming finally. more people are starting to notice
Mhm.
what's going on, but not enough yet.
Well, even the word groomer has become controversial itself, hasn't it? We're it's actually, it's now considered a term of derision. We're not supposed to say it to describe people who actually are trying to entice and to select kids, young people for sexual exploitation. So that word itself seems to have been chosen very specifically in order to hit hard and to grab your attention. Is that, am I on the right track there?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a funny thing when you start researching, what is a groomer and how to define grooming, it's how to define it. It's very different in all different places, and everything you said comes up that it's derogatory and we shouldn't use it because people are calling teachers groomers. And I really had to do a lot of research to get to the heart of what grooming is, and I spent time in the film on that because it's
Yeah.
really important. Because when you understand it, it makes it clear that that is exactly what is happening in our schools. I've been everybody every day on the internet is like, "Where's the Epstein list?" So we're always
Yeah.
thinking about Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Now Ghislaine was a groomer. That was her
Yeah.
job, was to go out and take the first steps in grooming is building trust, and then you start, showering people with gifts and compliments and friendship, and then it turns into little secrets and inches towards real abuse. That's what she did. And what happens in schools is kids there's a built-in trust. People trust teachers and librarians and principals. So when you're dropping your child off at the school, the kid thinks, "I'm safe here. Whatever goes on here, I can trust these people because mommy and daddy trust them and dropped me off here." So
Mhm.
they already have step 1 done. And then they are starting to talk to these kids as little as in pre-K about genitals, sexual attraction, relationships, sexuality, and it gets increasingly worse until we're talking about the most vulgar things by the time children are in 4th and 5th grade.
Mhm.
And that's grooming, and what it does, this is the dangerous part, well, one of the dangerous parts, I should say, because there's so much danger in this, is that it prepares them for the Ghislaine Maxwells of the world.
Right.
This
Hmm.
kid Man, this kid is primed and ready, already thinks that sex with adults is normal, no biggie, like, let's go, doesn't think STDs are bad, doesn't think abortion is bad, thinks everything is just for everybody, and now all she has to do is buy the kid a few gifts and say, "Come into this hotel with me."
Yeah.
That it is wild,
Mhm.
wild how we're preparing children for sex trafficking, online abuse, abuse by somebody they know, and we gotta stop it.
Yes. And these words are really important, aren't they? For example, the word pedophile is one that many people on the left are trying to legislate out of existence. We have these new words like maps, you know, which is, is basically a euphemism for pedophile. It's a minor attracted persons, but really it's the same thing, and it seems to be driving at exactly what you were saying, that a very clear agenda, heavily orchestrated, backed by a lot of money, backed by media, by academia,
Mhm.
schools, and the law and the legal system. It really, in order to target children as objects, and I emphasize objects of sexual exploitation and desire and use by adults. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about these words. And so sort of maintaining, standing on the ramparts, using the correct words. This is a really important front that we have to fight this battle on, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and I mean, just hearing you say these things, sometimes I stop and I think I'm on the internet saying that they're trying to normalize pedophilia and trying to hit people over the head with this, and if you ever told me 5 years ago that that
Yeah.
anybody was trying to do that, I would say that's I know there were nut jobs out there, but no way.
Yeah.
And I'd be becoming a fighter in this arena. I would have said you were crazy, but it is happening, and the map thing is just one of the many arrows they're throwing in this war on the kids.
Yeah, and this is really really important. It's vital because we're talking about children, and use these cliches. They're our future. But, it really is true. I wrote a piece for my show a couple of years ago where I actually delved into, for example, the whole transgender agenda. And I discovered to my horror that there's an inextricable link, undeniable link between the transgender agenda and pedophilia. When you go back to the beginnings of it, people like Mr. Money and the Kinsey Institute,
Yep.
the whole concept of introducing children to sexual exploitation is totally bound up with things like the transgender LGBTQ agenda. And you talk about this in the film, don't you?
I do. I do. When I sat down with Jamie, Michelle, and Sasha and Chris from Gays Against Groomers, they were really their main focus is on the transgender indoctrination of children.
Yeah.
So I did bring that into the film because that's also happening in the schools.
Yeah.
And when you're talking to a 3-year-old about their private parts and how they feel about it, and how just because a boy has this and a girl has this doesn't mean they're a boy or a girl, you're whacking out children's minds so badly. Um, I don't know how children who are fully indoctrinated in this are ever going to get a grip on reality.
hmm And one of the things that's really shocking when you look into this, and you raise this in your film, is how ubiquitous it is, how widespread it is. I can tell you, a couple of years ago, in my home community here in Alberta, Canada, I discovered that the city was sponsoring a drag queen story hour event in my local community with public money, and so I went there to city council to question the use of these funds, because I thought to myself, well, I'm a taxpayer. I think many taxpayers would object to this. And you won't be surprised to learn that I was confronted by many people who tried to heckle me unsuccessfully throughout my presentation. And while I was appearing before city council, who challenged me, by the way, at every turn, uh, some people were outside trashing my car, causing many thousands of dollars worth of damage. And so, this is the thing that happens. And I know this is something that many parents are afraid of. Well, if I speak up, will I be targeted? Will this happen to me? I don't want to step out from the crowd and get my car trashed or get threatened, like Leighton Gray or Elena Barbera, but really, it's so important to educate people and to make them activists in this movement, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And this is, you hit the nail on the head though. So first of all, thank you for sticking your neck out, because most people are still afraid to. Imagine 4 or 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, where cancel culture is rampant. People are losing their jobs. They're being ostracized in their neighborhoods, being silenced on social media. It was even scarier. Those things are starting to lift. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say they're all the way lifted, but it is a lot better. There's a group of people who, I talk about, and I get a lot of pushback when I talk about the teachers. So
Right.
when I talk about the teachers that are pushing the LGBTQIA, open sex agenda on children, um, they're only a part of the employees in our schools. There are a lot of teachers who agree with me and you that this is wrong to do to children.
Yes.
They don't speak up.
hmm
They have not spoken up. Very few of them have spoken up, and those that have been fired and have been ostracized. But I get frustrated because here's another group who are on the front lines just watching it happen. And if they had just stuck together right from when it started and said, no, 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 we're not doing this to these kids. And they pushed back on their union leadership, we may not be in the big mess that we're in today,
Yeah.
but they still aren't speaking up. And I find that really frustrating. So those of us out here have to take chances. It's
hmm
it. What is there's you're risked at risk anyway. Think about the direction of our nations. If the
hmm
children keep going on this path, we're going to have a bunch of traumatized, STD riddled, PSD sufferers who have drug and alcohol problems, because that is the path of sexually abused children when
hmm
they become
hmm
adults.
Yeah.
And we're going to have them in the tens of millions. And what is our society going to look like? You think we have a mental health problem now? We haven't seen anything yet. We
Right.
have to stop this. So you're going to sacrifice basic safety and decency in order for short-term safety. I mean, we have to wake people up to the reality of the road that we're on.
Mhm.
Yes, you make an excellent point. And the other aspect of all that is the violence. It's a cruel irony, and I'm sure you're aware of this, that what's happening in our schools is that these teachers who have been indoctrinated to school children in really leftist ideology that is really designed to harm them. Now, what happens is the authority the hierarchy that used to exist in schools, which protected teachers from violence. Now, the teachers who will question a student are actually exposed to violence and justified violence by students because now they can claim victimhood, and teachers are being reprimanded and sometimes fired after they're assaulted because they question some ideas that the students are putting forth about, pedophilia, about, leftist ideology and so on. So it really is a cruel irony that these teachers who, have been part of the problem, they're being victimized too by by the very education system, that let's say they fail to protect. That's another problem, isn't it?
Yes, there's so much, you have these angry children who aren't accomplishing anything, right? So
Yeah.
they don't have any self-satisfaction. So teachers, are constantly fighting for raises while literacy and math comprehension rates continue to plummet around the country. Everybody's frustrated. It really has reached a boiling point, and we see this violence, and the teachers at the same time aren't allowed, the schools aren't using discipline like they did when we were kids.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, maybe it wasn't nice that the nuns hit us on with rulers. Maybe that was a little too far in the other direction, but, you know, it worked.
Yeah,
Maybe somewhere just a step, more mild than that worked. It was
Right.
okay to suspend a child or expel a child or give them a really hard punishment. The
Mhm.
Catholic boys' schools where I grew up, they used to make them stand in the hall with their arms out and hold Bibles until their arms killed them. I know, a little cruel, but they
Mm.
grew up to be decent members of society
Yeah.
and didn't make those mistakes again.
Mhm.
We're not doing that now because discipline is, hurts feelings.
yeah. And, worse than discipline, what you discovered is that in many states, and this is also true in Canada, it's perfectly legal to show students the filthiest pornography, things that most adults would be reviled by. The kids are being shown this, in the name of sexual education. And this is part of or the reason why, or the impetus was for your creation of the film. Am I right?
Absolutely right. So, the obscenity exemption statutes that are in about three-quarters of states here in the United States, what that means is it's illegal to give or sell, pornography to a child. So if you go and give a Hustler magazine to a kid in the park or playground, you can be arrested and criminally charged. But if you give that same pornography to a child inside a library or a classroom, you are exempt from criminal prosecution because you have an affirmative defense. You can say, well, this was educational. This
Right.
was important for this child to learn. And that's how they get around it.
Mhm.
But people think, oh, I'm in a state without an exemption, so I'm safe. No, you're not. Because even in states where there isn't a criminal exemption, no one is prosecuting these people, even though
Mhm.
they're giving this to the kids. And the reason for that is they don't want to be called a bigot or,
Right.
there are all these lies like, oh, it's a First Amendment violation to take it away from the kids. It's not. It's
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
And I
So
can
mhm.
explain in detail, but yes.
It's a good example of what our mothers used to tell us, and that is, if you're too open-minded, your brain might fall out. And seems to be that's what's going on in terms of the way we're introducing children, and even very young children, to highly sexualized ideas and imagery, in schools and elsewhere in society. I'm interested to know, what has the response been like to your film? How has it been received? In schools, in the communities where it's being shown. What has the response been like online? Have you been exposed to some hatred and some backlash for telling the truth about what's going on?
Yes, I mean, I've mostly, thankfully, received gratitude from parents for saying thank you for putting this together and giving us a tool to use, and that's why it's free because I want parents to say to other parents in the neighborhood, "Come on over, let's watch this half-hour film. I'll give you a primer, and then they can talk about what's going on in their own town." It's to wake people up. that's been great. And even people who have been fighting this book fight for way longer before than me, long before I even knew it was a thing. They were fighting it. Some of them have come to me and said, you know, you did a good job and your facts are straight. And that meant a lot to me because it was a little scary putting it out.
Mhm.
The hatred does come. I get called a groomer and a Nazi and a fascist now and then, but it doesn't discourage me. You know,
Mhm.
I probably, if I'm going to get discouraged, it's more by, you know, a dry spell where I feel like, oh, am I on the right path? You know, that how we do that to ourselves, or the devil gets in our heads.
Yeah.
But my discouragement definitely doesn't come from the haters. In fact, they rev me up. And I'm like, okay, if you actually believe that a child needs to read this violent, gritty, graphic sex scene in order to learn something, you're broken. And we're in a battle of good and evil, and I'm on the right side of this. So we're gonna, you know, I'll go at you all day with facts.
Mm.
We have this very serious problem with this in Canadian schools. In fact, my own son, who's in 12th grade now, we had to pull him out of public school. He was traumatized by something called Pride Month, which we used to call June. And so this is rampant here. I noticed in the United States during the Biden administration, the problem became very acute. People like Matt Walsh were very key in bringing this to light. His "What Is a Woman" documentary,
Yes.
I think, was groundbreaking. But seeing these parents go before school boards and being shouted down just for reading from some of these disgusting books, really was shocking. But we've had a recent decision in the House of Lords in Great Britain, which said basically, you know, this idea of a man becoming a woman is nonsense. And there's an encouraging decision out of the United States Supreme Court, and I'm curious to know, do you see signs that perhaps some inroads are being made in the quote unquote battle against sexualization of children and this LGBTQ agenda?
There are some inroads, but I can say that I still feel like we're losing this war
Yeah.
against the children. So the Huntington Beach, California, for example, they flipped their city council conservative, and they worked to ensure that all adult books are put in only the adult section of the library, and they were removed from the schools. But you have the American Library Association and the ACLU, the American Civil
Yeah.
Liberties Union, you know them.
Yeah.
They came in and they got a new ballot, a special election happening on June 10th, and they're putting a ballot to the
Mm.
people to get the books put back, because they say
Right.
that, you know, the librarians know best about what's age appropriate and what kids need.
Yeah.
And because the American Library Association is bent on sexualizing children. And here again, this is where you can't trust the librarians. Sorry, I'll say it flat out.
Mhm.
And I'm sure
Yeah.
there are some good ones here and there, but I'm not hearing them. Where are they?
Yeah.
They're keeping quiet. So there's a thing where we had to win, and they're coming in and fighting, and they make us just fight and fight and fight for the most basic decency, protecting a child's innocence. You will never convince me that this is a political battle. I'm way past thinking this is about politics.
Right.
This is a moral divide that we can't face. This is a battle of good and evil,
Yeah.
and you know, we're here for it, and we're going to keep fighting it. So I'm going to do what I can to say publicize that
Mm.
June 10th election and what's at stake. And
Oh,
so there's an example of when we win, we still have to keep fighting.
yeah.
Well, God bless you for that. I mean, I agree with you totally. We're dealing with principalities and powers, as St. Paul put it. Really, we're dealing with metaphysical evil. I just, there's no question about it. And there's a reason why they're after our children, and we know what that reason is. And this battle is far from over, and it's not just in schools either. You know, right now we're seeing a situation where even courts. When I was researching, I noticed you posted on your X page. There was a post from Attorney General Pamela Bondi. She confirmed that our FBI agent just arrested Hannah Dugan, a county judge in Milwaukee, for allegedly helping an illegal alien avoid an arrest by ICE. No one is above the law. These judges are these leftist activist judges are a big part of the problem too, aren't they?
Absolutely. It's funny because remember when the whole Black Lives Matter thing was going on, and there was all this talk about how our justice system is broken and there's systemic racism, and I believe there was some truth to it. Um, but I really didn't. Again, this is another thing that as an American, I was still in a position where I was waking up from trusting my government, and I'm
Right.
realizing now exactly how corrupt all of it is. Remember believing, I don't know, you may have been awake to politics longer than me. I used to believe there's corruption in the government, but it's mostly good and it mostly
Me
runs.
too. No, me too. Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
it's the opposite. Now I'm like,
Hmm.
somewhere there's gotta be some good in there somewhere, but it's
Yeah.
mostly just this corrupt web of red tape and lies and theft, and that's what, we're seeing now, and, I mean, for a judge to be sneaking an illegal alien out the back door to avoid a legal prosecution and a legal, it's an obstruction of justice, and I
Yeah.
and I hope that she's prosecuted for it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's not the only situation. There's another one involving a judge in the U.S., which is even stranger. And this is this judge who actually apparently had a gangbanger in his home. So this is judges are just people, and as astonishing as that is for the general public to understand, judges are basically just old lawyers, and they're just as susceptible and in fact sometimes more vulnerable to sin and to temptation as other people because, as Lord Acton famously wrote, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And in a courtroom, judges have absolute power, and sometimes, or they think they do. And so it is encouraging to see that, let's say, the rule of law is being enforced in America in relation to these activist judges.
It is encouraging, it is, and I have to and those are the things that keep us keep us moving forward and excited to keep in the fight, but again, every time for every small win that we have, they're coming at us with 10, cases, legal cases,
Yeah.
nonsense just to basically for the Trump administration, what they're trying to do, all I see is they're just trying to run the clock out
Yeah.
on them with legal nonsense,
Yeah.
even if it is just
Yeah, they call it due process.
yeah,
Yeah, but I noticed that, when someone in California doesn't wanna bake a cake for a gay wedding, there's no due process
yeah,
there. The ACLU is not coming in to help there. But you're right, 19 states have sued the Trump administration over its DEI demands in schools, and specifically, that's the Trump administration saying, "Look, this stuff diversity, inclusion, equity has no place in schools. It's not educational. It's totally, political, doctrinal, and really is not teaching the kids anything except hatred for each other, for themselves, and for their country." But yet, this battle is not over. It's not going to be easily won, is it?
no, not at all. It's not gonna be easily won, but I do have hope that in arresting, say, these judges who are breaking the law, that other judges, no matter how much pressure they're getting, no matter how much they're being blackmailed, will stop and say, maybe I'll slow down a little bit and wait and see how this goes. Maybe they'll back off. I do believe that a lot of them are, like I said, blackmailed or bribed to
Yeah.
do the things that they're doing. Um, so to whatever extent they're going to weigh, now they're in a position where they have to weigh their evils. Do
Hmm.
I allow myself to be blackmailed and exposed, or do I allow this course of punishment for breaking the law? It's going to be interesting to watch them. There's got to be some squirming in their seats as we speak.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about power, but also money. I was listening to an interview with Dr. Jordan Peterson with Joe Rogan recently, and Dr. Peterson said something profound, which he's wont to do. He said that, in the post World War II era, we built up these sort of storehouses of value. We've become a very wealthy society in places like United States and Canada. And that's good in a sense, but that value also attracts people who are parasitic, who want to exploit, and they'll go where money is. So they'll go into things like politics, they'll go into entertainment, they'll go into the judiciary, or heaven forbid, the legal profession, and because there's value there that they can exploit, and that's an interesting way to put it, and I thought about that in the context of the work that you're doing. And, the people that you're fighting, in a real sense, they're almost parasites upon, the sort of the body of society, right? And there's a real danger that any parasite can kill its host. And that danger is real, isn't it?
That is so real, and it's such a good point to bring up. So we don't even have complete numbers, but it's got to at least be in the tens of millions of dollars being spent on pornographic books that are
Yeah.
going into school libraries and going on their shelves.
Yeah.
The gender indoctrination materials, which are provided by places like the ALA, the Human Rights Campaign, Planned Parenthood, they're all making money on taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
Gender indoctrination itself is a big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when you're sexualizing all these kids, now the abortion industry is getting rich. Now the STD treatment industry is getting rich. The mental, emotional talk therapy industry is getting more customers. I mean, it's just, it all comes back to the mighty dollar.
Hmm.
And it is evil.
Hmm. And the worst part is really it's exploiting children. And the other thing that's terrible about it is, those organizations that you mentioned, the ACLU, for example, their role, their original mandate was to protect the civil liberties of people, including children. And yet it seems as though a lot of these organizations have become politicized. They become sort of rotten from within, and they're doing the very opposite of the work that they were designed to do. This must be infuriating for people like you who are out there on the front lines fighting them.
Yeah, I always, when I was younger, I was what little politics I understood. I was conservative. I would say things like, "Well, I'm conservative on the economy, but I'm socially liberal." I would say stupid things like that. That really were just vapid statements that meant I
Yeah.
didn't really know what I was talking about, right? But that's where I stood, and I
Hmm.
was aware of the ACLU, and I appreciated. I thought sometimes they were a little ridiculous, but I appreciated their commitment to upholding, the Constitution.
Right.
And they're not there anymore. They
No.
don't care about parental rights. They want the government to be daddy and mommy. That's
Yeah.
their whole goal is communism. And it's
Hmm.
very hard to comprehend. It would take a big study to really dig into the ACLU and figure out where it went wrong and which people infiltrated it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's gone way off the rails, and
Hmm.
I don't trust them at all, and now they're just another junk organization whose, agenda is to destroy the country as far as I'm
Hmm.
concerned, and destroy America's children.
Hmm. So, let me ask you kind of a personal question. Apart from, your son who sort of drew you into this fight, what's driving you? You've said that you're a person of faith. What has your faith meant to you, and how has that been something that has guided you and inspired you, in the work that you're doing?
It started, God, before COVID, where, I spent my life, I was raised Catholic, but we were more cultural Catholic. And, I was born and raised in Brooklyn. We were Italian. It was just it was all woven together, the whole culture with the Catholicism. And I would go to church in fits and starts. I'm going to church for a few months and then I wouldn't. And as an adult, and I really got taken during COVID when I lived in Boston and my condo looked over a park, and there was a small Baptist church in the neighborhood and an Irish Catholic neighborhood, and they were holding services out in the park. And one day I was out there and my dog got off the leash and he interrupted the service and I was embarrassed. And, it was one thing after another that drew me back into the church and into the Bible. And, when things were tough, not, with work during that period where so much was shut down, I really came to prayer and I started praying a lot.
Mm, mm,
And, at one point I just gave up and I said, it's on you. You got to show me where to go, what to do. And it was like 3 months later that my son walked in and said, "Do you wanna make a YouTube video?" And it set me on this path, and I learned
Yeah.
to trust God and stay on the path, and when I'm scared and when it feels like I'm standing on barren ground or, the demons are really coming at me, I trust. I trust that he put me on this path for a reason, and he's not gonna abandon me.
Yeah. I know exactly uh, how you feel. And I always remind myself, the most repeated words in the Bible are "do not fear." But, we have to put on that armor of God to fight the kinds of evils that you're out there fighting. And this work not only is hard, very challenging, must be very stressful, but it's also expensive. So if people want to get involved and they want to support the work that you're doing with your documentary and your other advocacy, how do they do that?
They can actually give on AmericanGroomerFilm.com, which incidentally is the same place they can watch the film for free. And it is helpful because, for example, I'm flying to Nevada this weekend to speak at an event about this. And, these gigs aren't paid,
Yeah.
it's out of my own pocket. And it is expensive and it is hard. But, every now and then somebody will come along and help out. And it's a huge blessing for that.
Well, I'm going to encourage people to not only watch the film, but also to lend their financial support to the work that you're doing, this important work that you're doing. Tell me, do you have plans for, following follow-up films to the one that you've done, or perhaps a book? What's in the works for you going forward?
Right now, my most pressing thing is not another film. Not that I wouldn't, but if then I don't think my cameraman and editor would work for free again. So it would be a much more expensive endeavor because I would need people. I would have to pay people this time, um, and so it's not in the works just yet.
Mhm.
I would love to do a film that tells this whole story when it's over, when the war is won.
Mm.
For now, my focus is on legislation, and that's
Mhm.
where I've really started to dig in, is following and tracking legislation around the country and
Mhm.
seeing like this little Huntington Beach thing and learning where the fights are and
Mhm.
exposing the truth and helping to mobilize people.
Yeah.
So my role is still going to be getting the word out.
Mhm.
But yeah, unless there's a windfall of some sort, another film is going to have to be put on the back burner.
I noticed that you're very active in producing video content on places like YouTube, talking about different legislative issues and things of that nature. That must take up a lot of your time as well.
It does. It does. It really, and it's funny, YouTube, this is, the constant like smackdown from the left. I had a decent sized YouTube channel of my own at one point, and I just woke one day, it was just gone.
Yeah.
And they took it down. They wouldn't talk to me. So, now my YouTube channel is much smaller because I don't invest as much in it as I was, but the time, I'm actually restarting my podcast next week again because had to take a few weeks off for some family stuff.
Mhm.
So, that's going to be 3 days a week. And yeah, it takes all day to plan a show sometimes, I mean,
Yeah.
even just talking to me, you watch the film, you're telling me you looked at all my links and you spent at least a few hours with the planning of it. It does take time, but it's absolutely worth it if
It
you can
is. It
get
is.
the word out and talk about things that not everybody is talking about,
Mhm.
and talk about it in a deeper way because people really, I'm noticing, really want to know more.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want to
Yeah.
know more than Donald Trump signed executive, order about blank in the
Right.
headline. They want to understand more because they're waking up to the fact that we've all been on autopilot. We've
Yeah.
all been asleep at the wheel, trusting that our government is handling things, and we're all getting smacked in the face with reality, which is maybe a good thing. And people are trying to understand where it went wrong. And it is so deep and so wide and so tangled
Mm.
that, I just try to pull out one thread now and then and figure it out.
Well, you're doing a tremendous job, and I think people watching this hopefully are inspired to do what you're doing, because really, as parents, and not even as parents, just as citizens. We have to be concerned about the things that you talk about and that you profile in the film. And if we are going to live in societies that really care about each other, we've got to walk out that. We have to walk that out. Rights, on a page are just words on a page. They're meant to be walked out and lived out. That goes for, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of religion. And so if we want to protect children, that's not something we can just talk about. We actually have to get out and do it the way you are, don't we?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Mm,
You have to understand what's going on in your own city, in your own state, in your own legislative body, and look at even if just go to a school board meeting. Every
mm,
time your local district has a meeting, go. It can be a
mhm.
little boring, parts of it, but not all of it. It gets a
Yeah,
little dicey in there sometimes. There's some juice,
yeah,
and but that's how you learn how they're making decisions and who's there. And when
yeah,
you find that they're doing something untoward, hold their feet to the fire.
yeah.
And I work with an organization called Take Back the Classroom, and it's takebacktheclassroom.com. And the woman over there is named Karen England, and she's become a mentor to me. And she's taught me. She's been is one of those people who's been in this fight for 20 years before I knew it existed, and she's been helping me to really develop my knowledge. And she helps parents to challenge books, challenge school boards, and trains them on how to do it properly, because you can't just go in and say, I don't want my kid reading this gay book.
Right,
it, you're not then you're trying to violate First Amendment rights.
Right, right.
There's a way to do it
mhm,
that you can get vulgarities removed.
hmm This reminds me of when I was giving a public address once on a similar topic, and I asked the crowd for a show of hands, everyone who was concerned, especially parents, about the types of books that are found in their school libraries, and a lot of hands went up. My next question was, how many of you have volunteered to serve on your local library board? No hands went up. And this is the problem. When the good people don't get involved, the bad ones do. And when I started looking at our local library boards, guess what I found? I found, the people who were had these leftist views that supported the sexualization of children, wanted these books, brought these books and films into libraries, invited drag queens to come in and read to small children. I read, actually perform for them, and so you really this American Groomer movie of yours is really, really important, and really profiling and exposing people to the truth about what's going on, but also our duty, our obligation to come forward and defend children in the way that you're trying to do. So, folks, we've been talking with Elena Barbera, who is a filmmaker, an unlikely filmmaker, a mother, but it's a great film. You can watch it for free at AmericanGroomer.com. Is that correct?
AmericanGroomerFilm.com.
Film.com. Excellent. And there's a lot of really great content you'll find there, including finding out about her podcast and some of the other videos she's been doing that are really educational. And it's been our pleasure to talk with her. Before you go, we have something called the reading list. And I've got a couple of books that I'm going to add, and then I'm going to ask you for one or two selections if you can think of any. One book I found is called Grooming and the Sexual Abuse of Children, Institutional, Internet, and Familial Dimensions. This is a book that was written by a woman named Anne-Marie McClellandon. And here she's talking about, she critically examines the official and popular discourses on grooming, predominantly framed within the context of online sexual exploitation and abuse committed by strangers and institutional child abuse committed by those in positions of trust. And it goes into a lot of detail, perhaps more detail than with the topics that are covered in the film that we've been talking about today with our guest. So that's one book. The other one, which I haven't read yet, but looks like a sort of maybe a less clinical read, is called "The Sexualization of Childhood" or "Childhood in America." This is a book written by a woman named Sharna Olfman, and the description is only a generation or two ago, childhood in the United States was understood to be a unique and vulnerable stage of development, a time for play and protection from adult preoccupations and responsibilities. But in recent decades, we appear to have jettisoned these norms, and the lines that separate the lifestyles of even very young children from adults are blurring. And here it talks about, for example, the idea that although young children cannot smoke cigarettes, they can't buy alcohol, they can't drive cars, they can't do many things that adults can do, but it seems as though they can choose, even as toddlers, their own gender, which is to suggest that if they can choose their own gender, it's a short walk to the idea that they can actually have sex with adults, which seems to be the goal of the people who are pushing this agenda. So there's a couple of books that I found that are sort of in line with some of the important topics that are covered in your film. Are there any reading selections or other sources of information that you would direct our viewers and listeners to if they want to find out more information about the topics that you cover in your film?
One of the research papers that I read was by who I mentioned in the film, a man named Kenneth Lanning, who was
Mhm.
an FBI agent who, for almost 40 years, worked in the child sex crimes unit.
Mhm.
And he is the one who has what is considered the gold standard of
Mm.
the definition of grooming.
Mm.
And the paper's probably 10 pages long, and just Google his name, Kenneth Lanning Grooming, and you can find it. I can't remember the name of the paper right now. That is something that'll kind of get you really thinking. He talks about, how we used to talk about stranger danger and, and what grooming really, really looks like in coaches and priests and teachers and strangers as well. That's something that I'd love people to have a better understanding of.
Mhm, mhm. Well, we want to thank you for being our special guest here today. Folks, we've been talking with Elena Barbera. She is a filmmaker and mother. I should say she's probably a mother and filmmaker in that order. I put those probably in the wrong order, but this documentary is truly gripping. I can't say I enjoyed it, but I'm very glad that I watched it. I'm going to watch it again now, having talked to our guest. It's called American Groomer. And you can watch it for free. You want to give the website again, Elena, before you go?
Sure, it's AmericanGroomerFilm.com.
Okay. And if people want to find out more about you and follow you, they can do that on X and also on other social media platforms, right?
Yes, I'm on pretty much all of them at the Based Mother and at the website AmericanGroomerFilm.com. There are links to all of those there also, so make it easy.
That based mother moniker, is that a gift from your son?
Yeah, it was a gift from the internet. Yeah, they called me the base mother because I say it like it is. And it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse to have that personality trait.
Well, you certainly live up to the title, and we want to thank you so much for all of the incredible work that you're doing, the courageous work that you're doing on behalf of really all children living in Western society, not only in the United States, but in Canada and elsewhere. And I hope everyone who's watching and listening to this will check out this very important and in some ways groundbreaking film. Thank you very much for being with us today and sharing some time with us to talk about the film and all of your work. So thanks very much for being our special guest, and I want to wish you much continued success in all of your future work and your public speaking. I hope there's going to be a follow-up film or perhaps a book in this. I get the sense that your work isn't done.
Thank you. It's not no, it's nowhere near done. We're just but thank you for having me, Leighton.
It's been my pleasure.